sometimes, so please excuse that. So I've actually been here since November 2008, which is quite a while ago. And when I first moved here, I kind of was in advertising, so I worked for 180 and I was working for Wieden & Kennedy. But when I first moved over here, the recession was just hitting, so I kind of had 2 months of working, and then suddenly everyone was like, well, there's just no work coming in, and there's just nothing really to kind of do here. So instead of really stressing out that I just relocated my whole life over with all my stuff for maybe no reason, I decided to take inspiration from this city that I was in. And I'm from the Wirral, which is near Liverpool, and then I lived in London. And so then coming here, it was quite a new environment, and I loved looking at how like all the houses were like sinking and all the windows were like in kind of weird off positions. Like in Britain, I'd never seen that, they would have just been probably fixed. And I love the fact that they just let these houses sink and just take on their natural form. And I think when you're in a place that's a little bit different than that, you kind of inspire new creative thoughts, because it's just something a little bit unusual from what maybe you're used to being around. So instead of just being sat at my desk and not really doing anything, I decided to make something out of paper. Now, paper was a material that I worked with all the time when I was younger, but I hadn't really worked with it for ages, because I think when you're at school, you just want to build everything and do anything, and then maybe the more you start going through the education system, sometimes people are like, oh, that you won't make a living off that, so just kind of leave that behind. So I had left it behind, but then when I was faced up with being then in a job where there wasn't really anything to do, I thought, well, maybe I can relearn a material that I used to work with when I was younger and learn a bit more about it and see what kind of form it would take or how easy it would be to work with it. So I actually took a picture of a building that I cycle past every day on the way to work, and I thought I'd make it even more strange or weird by twisting it in Photoshop and then deciding to make that building instead, which is this building here. So I then looked at the picture on Photoshop and then kept copying it as I was making. And then I used this to really learn about the material and see how it would really stick. So I was making all the little tiles, and all the awning details that are going along the side are about 2 millimeters in thickness, which is super, super small. But I actually have quite shaky hands. But I was able to really cut all these small details and kind of move them over, and it wasn't really too much of a problem for me. So then I thought, well, maybe if I'm able to kind of do this, maybe I can kind of look into doing something a bit more with this for work. And I think I was just surrounded by a lot of great people at the time who were also in the creative field, but could see how excited I was by building a weird little paper model. So they kind of encouraged me to keep following this. So I put it online to see how people would respond to it. And I think because I made something that was just a little bit different from a normal house, it did quite well on the internet in terms of who blogged about it and who wrote about it. And I think because I just put a little bit of a twist on it, made it a bit different, it kind of looked like I'd gone a little bit further with the creativity. Even though it wasn't a huge step, it just got more interest. So you can see then that I was learning how to then cut out all the bricks. So I stuck 2 sheets of paper on themselves and then kind of cut half bricks out and then kind of plopped each one out by hand. And this is kind of how I decided to do this texture. So I just wanted to learn a little bit more about it and see how it would stand up. So with it kind of doing well enough, I was then encouraged by friends to then leave advertising, and I got a job at a bar as a champagne waitress instead. So then my grandma, I remember her saying to my mum, she was like, she got a degree at Central St. Martin's and now she's a champagne waitress in Amsterdam. And mum was like, no, just trust her, I think it's going to be, it'll be okay, or she feels like this is maybe the best thing for her to do right now. So I was still 25, 26 at the time, so I wasn't too stressed about maybe taking on a new job. So then I decided to get to work on making an even bigger house and think, well, what else could I do with it, or how else could I apply it? And again, when you move to a new city and you're in a world that you initially thought would be quite similar but is quite foreign, you start to see different things that you weren't used to seeing. So I remember moving my first 2 weeks here, and people were moving in through the windows. Now in Britain we kind of just go up through the stairs, but people were going in through the windows here. And I remember being with my bed, and it wasn't quite fitting up the stairs, and my taxi driver was like, "We'll be able to get this in, don't worry." So then he kind of knocks on the guys downstairs, they let us travel it through their house, and then we end up passing it up through the balconies. And I'm like, this is so bizarre but amazing. We're passing this bed from the ground floor to a balcony into my new window. So I think that then inspired me for maybe I can make a short film to talk about this moving experience. So this was the basis of this world I wanted to create, that feeling that's, a little bit of a story that's just a bit different from what I was used to. So whilst I was in champagne waitressing, I was pretty much just sat there like that on the left, just doing tiny movements to make all these tiny details. I gave myself a neck spasm by really not moving at all. I remember just doing 16 hours straight trying to cut out the roof, and then waking up the next morning and not being able to move. So I learned that sometimes it's good to have a little bit of a break, because maybe if you're just doing the same stuff, you then have to take another week off work to recuperate. And I learned from that last job that maybe if I wanted to try and move careers into something else, I'd have to really start bigger than just starting kind of small in terms of how big my model was supposed to be. And I also learned that I think when you first start to get used to a way of working, that you normally underestimate how much you might need for something. So these little amounts of greens here, I was like, this will totally cover all the area around the building, and it kind of just got there, and I'm like, that is super depressing. So, if you can see how much was needed, it kind of I was really, really short with my expectations. But then this was great. It was good learning to realize, okay, well then whatever you think you need to do, triple or quadruple that really. And it was great to really still get to understand the material that I wanted to work with. And obviously, to do a short film, I obviously didn't come with a lot of money. My champagne waitressing was just pretty much paying my rent. So it wasn't then going to be I'm going to hire a crew and we've got $40K. I didn't have anything like that. So I decided to just set it all up in my living room at the time, and my flatmates were cool enough to let me lay all this out. And then, thankfully through advertising, I had a few people that put me in touch with some other people and let me, use the cameras and kind of get a bit further than without that help really. And you can see my hand in the top, just at the very top by the building, so that gives you an idea of scale. But if you've ever worked with stop motion before, you realize stop motion is super, super laborious and takes forever. So I knew I was possibly going to get the help of a DP, someone to do the lighting and to frame all this stuff for 2 days. And 2 days is not enough time to do a stop motion. So I was trying to work out other solutions that I could still tell my story and still show off these sets that I could build, but do it in a slightly different way. So then we decided to work with wires and string, and then you can see here, and puppeteer everything instead. Now my shaky hands came in quite useful for trying to move insects and stuff. I thought it was fun to put mechanical sounds and then go play for movement. So then there were two of us puppeteering this thing. So I'm actually this flower on the left-hand side, bringing this in on a rod, and then there was another guy bringing the other flower in, and we were trying to pull this car like along the street, but we kept pulling it. Obviously, you can't see any human heads in the shot, so we were pulling it like from kind of hidden positions. But obviously, you kept pulling it into the shrubbery, and then we have to reset, and then we pull it more into the shrubbery. But at least we still got it all done in 2 days. But it was a huge job. So I built all that stuff by myself. So to kind of stop myself going crazy, then I was watching more fantasy movies and Disney movies to be like, just keep encouraging myself that they will have happy endings. So just to keep watching all this stuff and keep enthusiastic about what I was doing, And yeah, I then sent this out to production companies, hoping that someone would maybe see that I had some talent in what I was doing, or just kind of so I wouldn't be stuck doing champagne forever. So then finally, I actually did hear back from somebody, but I think it took quite a few months. So obviously, you send all these ideas out, but it's not like an immediate thing. You have to then meet someone, and then sometimes someone might finally get back to you. So about 3 months later, someone got back and asked if I'd ever worked with toilet paper before, which is like maybe not some people's dream job, but I was super enthusiastic about trying to work out with toilet paper. They asked if I could apply the skills I'd used from that last job to then try to create this imaginary world out of toilet paper. Now, it was actually a really good building material to work with. Like on that other one, I was really there for ages watching glue dry for so many hours, just trying to be patient. And this is what I've learned with model making is so many people, if I have a team of people working with me, just get really frustrated when it's just not sticking and you just have to wait an extra 10 seconds, but it might be annoying, but then it'll be fine. Whereas if you move it, it's just going to smudge all over the place and it won't really hold. But toilet paper just whoop, stuck together. I didn't even have to do anything with it. It was really good. So we pitched for this job, and she took a trust in me to be the art director of this, and we pitched against 3 CG companies, and she was like, we're completely the underdog in this, but maybe we stand a chance. And we were the only one that said, I think we can make it for real. And because we said that, we actually won the job. And I had no experience except me pulling things in a wire, but they trusted us to then kind of build this whole world up. So then I went from being by myself in my apartment to then being flown over to LA, which was amazing. So then I was suddenly then working with toilet paper in Los Angeles, but you kind of leave the studio covered in little pieces of toilet paper, and they're like, let's go for dinner, and you're like, oh god, and they're like an absolute tramp. But it was really good. I think I learned a lot by working with a different kind of paper, really. This then opened me up to new ways of thinking about paper, because I was like, well, maybe then if I can work with toilet paper, what other materials are out there that are in this paper world? So as a personal project, I decided to pick up sandpaper and see what it would be like and what kind of feeling I could create by working with sandpaper. So I wanted to create a series that played on textures and people's emotions when you work with a kind of abrasive material. So I wanted people to then see this series and really think about their interaction with the items. And it was amazing. I worked with a photographer, and we really brought out all the texture that was in the material. But I think just because, again, we took an element that everybody knew and we put like a little bit of a twist on it, this also did quite well on like the internet in terms of how people responded on it. It's quite nice to take something that people know and just put another little bit of a twist on it. So from here, I was also excited by what other things could I kind of put a twist on, or what other emotions of people can I play around with. So I partnered with a guy that I used to work with when I was at 180. We decided to make the world's most famous instrument of death, the guillotine, and covered it in paper as an experiment to see what would happen. Like, could we change people's ideas about it, or could we change how people interact with it just by covering it in paper? And the answer is, yes, we really could change how people interacted with it. Like, people queued up for this thing. We had people asking if they could go in next, which no one has probably said in front of a guillotine before, ever. Well, maybe, but not really. And then we had parents like trusting us with their children. So we totally took something that everybody knows and took it into a new world just by covering it in paper. So then we were asked by a museum, and it's amazing with the internet actually that you can put these ideas out there and people will find them. So some museum in Switzerland got in touch saying that they'd got the blade from the French Revolution, like the one that had killed Marie Antoinette, and would we be interested in exhibiting alongside it? So obviously we were like, yeah, of course. We've gone from like brainstorming in a bar in Amsterdam, like this weird idea, to then someone finding it, to then being opposite the piece of history that had inspired it in the first place. But we knew we then wanted to make the world's most beautiful guillotine to really like contradict against the real cold blade and to try and make more of a difference between the two. So this guillotine was like 3.8 meters high, and obviously then it's got two legs kind of coming down on it. So it was going to take so many hours of me going crazy by myself, like working on all these little details. And I think you've just got to keep like maybe watching videos and other stuff to keep yourself motivating. I mean, you can see like all the butterflies that are there that have been cut out, and my little feet next to some amounts of thorns, and then you can see that pile kept growing. And then, I mean, I don't use my computer that often, but I mean, at this point I really wasn't any room to use it at all. So I mean, sometimes it's great to come up with these great big ideas, but then in reality it does take so much time to kind of build all this stuff. But then finally it was ready, and then we were able to take it off to Switzerland and cover the guillotine. So you can see there, that's how we started, and it is just a normal wooden frame, but we just drop sheets of paper on people and we just cover it in paper. Because I mean, 4 meters is quite high, and if it was just paper, it wouldn't really last, and this thing was there for over a year, so we had to really make it kind of solid. And then there's the final one. See all the little butterflies, but they just cover a small amount, but I mean, I felt glad that we put all that effort in the first place. So, not like my favourite thing to do is just to twist weird things or like put, you know, them in unusual places, but it is quite enjoyable, and I do quite like doing it as a side project, to take something that everybody knows and put it in an unusual setting. So, Alien is one of my like favourite movies, and I love watching it. And I think I must have watched it a few times while I was building the guillotine. But I thought, why does Alien not normally exist in people's minds? And I was like, Christmas time. So I decided to make a series of how would Alien interact with Christmas. So I made him like under the mistletoe, very excited to be kissed. But then just by covering him in paper, he kind of then looks quite sweet with these colours, and it's quite interesting to then create a new world for Alien to exist in. I had him eating Christmas pudding. I had the turkey birth scene. I don't know if many of you know Alien, but it kind of bursts out of something, so it would be kind of funny to burst out of a turkey. And I was like, imagine what that alien would look like if Alien takes on whatever it's come out of. That would be amazing. Alien turkey would be pretty rad. And random. I had made the face hugger, and then I put him like strangling the fairy on top of the Christmas tree. I don't know if that's just a British thing to put up there, but she wasn't having a good time. And then I made Christmas morning, so that's the egg that the little alien hatches out. And then waiting for Santa. But it was things like this seem to do better. Like if you want to just kind of boost your portfolio or kind of get some interest, then just coming up with something that's just a little bit of a twist from the normal. It wasn't too hard for me to quickly make all this stuff. But then it did seem to get like a funny response from people because they weren't used to seeing Alien in a normal Christmas surrounding environment. But I do love to tell stories, and I think sometimes when you get given a really creative project, there isn't always the amount of money to put behind it, but then the client lets you just make kind of whatever you want. And this product was for a strawberry milkshake flavored vodka, which sounds completely rank. But they were like, well, you can, kind of just create a dress to really sell the story. And I'm like, actually, this sounds like an amazing project. I'd love to make something to sell something kind of as crazy and wacky as that, because then they'll probably let me be really crazy and wacky. And they did. We won the pitch by coming up with a really crazy idea. So I wanted to make cows that would eat strawberries, and then they'd kind of turn pink, and then they'd be like on a milking carousel. So it's kind of funny to come up with these big ideas, but then again, it's like, how do we realize them? How do we make them come to life? And when you don't have much money, you then have to kind of look to simpler methods to bring these things to life. So we ended up using bicycle chains and like MDF to bring to life this story, and just some cogs. So I worked with the same guy that had built the wooden frame for my guillotine, and then we made this moving dress. Now, I wanted every layer to spin in a different way and the fans to rotate. But obviously, you'll see it in a minute, obviously when something at the bottom is rotating, you can't have a million wires going in there, so then we just made these fans loose and put a giant industrial fan on the right-hand side. So you can see here what we kind of did. And it was a bit against health and safety when we took this to the set, because the woman we put in the middle, we had to like lower her in through scaffolding, which the production company were not impressed with. But we were like, she'll be cool, don't worry about it. So we just kept lowering her in, and then she's standing like halfway in on this dress on like a little plank of wood. And then like when she was tired, so she kind of just had to stand in this position to not damage the dress, we then pull her out with the scaffolding. But yeah, it was really interesting. So you can see then these little fans are turning around, and we've just got one thing blowing from the side. But initially they were all supposed to rotate around, but then you've got to make some compromises, and I don't mind that there's just a section of it that's spinning at the bottom. And obviously all the drinks aren't filled with the liquid because they fall over and it'd be a nightmare. So it's just like resin with like some food colouring in it. So then I think when I have some spare time, I like to then play around with to learn more about the material. So when like briefs come in, I know more about what I'm talking about, or I can say, actually, this is possible, this isn't possible. So I decided to make a really, really small series of paper artworks and just make these kind of moving GIFs. So the cup is like just to scale. So that little guy moving, and then that boulder is like under a centimetre in terms of like length. And then I find when you're doing small stuff, it's quite interesting to play around with the sound to really tell some story. But and then I built, so this one's also this little shot glass. So you can see that the tentacles are kind of about this big, and the little suckers are like, again, about 2 millimeters. So I actually built a series of 5, but I'll just show you. Sometimes I think it's not like I have a morbid personality. On reflection, I'm like, some of these don't always have a happy ending. But yeah, I think it's quite interesting to learn to go really small, but then also to go really big. So because I've been working with paper then mostly now for quite a few years, people are now starting to trust me with even bigger jobs and bigger jobs. So this was a set that I made just actually in Los Angeles a few weeks ago. But this is like over 24 feet in terms of length, and it's huge. Like, that guy at the back is a kind of a normal sized guy, so there's a little bit of scale going in there. But each one of these buildings completely animated, so we have like a team of people sometimes working on this stuff, and we shoot things with replacements. So for an animation sequence, some of those buildings would have like, say, 6 to 8 maybe different replacements that come in for the stock frame animation, and then they grow up in this way. And I mean, when you have a bigger set, then you can start to really play with the lighting and create these more moody atmospheres. So I was really excited to then work with someone that's more in normal film, so he didn't just light them and be, let's make it all cute and super papery. It was really exciting for me to then have someone just try and light it like a normal film set, and really bring a new kind of character to the work, which is great, because I think for some of these jobs, paper is super, super versatile, but unless you've done something that's a little bit different, people can't always imagine it, because it's hard to imagine this other world when, even though you know it's to be really true. I'm now super grateful that someone's like took a leap into kind of lighting it with like some good mood, and we can create like an even bigger world. So I'm excited to see when this is completely finished what other projects this might lead to, really. I mean, we made about 7 different sets on this job, so this was 1 out of 7, but this was the biggest set. But yeah, it's great for stop motion when you work with a bigger crew of people and you learn all about their different kind of skills. And I always love working with new animators, because animators are always bringing new kind of quality to the work, and it's amazing to see different personalities come out by how different people move with stuff. But for my last project, I just like to say sometimes it's quite nice to bring things back into a reality again. So, I mean, I love being in my weird fantasy world, and I love kind of proposing these weird, preposterous questions about where things could sit or where other things exist. But I think sometimes it's great to use what you've learned from a project. Like from the guillotine, I learned that I could kind of use paper and really change how people see a topic. And then sometimes it's nice to then use those times to experiment, but then be like, okay, well, how else could I use what I've learned? So I decided to make a whole series of paper genitals to try and raise awareness of female genital mutilation. So it's great to live in a completely other bubble sometimes, but then sometimes it's nice when we can just take some time and try and educate people on maybe a topic that's a little bit more serious. But there we go, that's my kind of look at doing paper crafting. But I mean, it just doesn't always take much. Sometimes it's just a case of taking 2 things that don't exist, putting them together, and then you've created a whole new fantasy world. And sometimes those weird ideas I've had have come up by doing another different project, and then I'm sat there like, oh great, maybe then these happen, because you're just watching a video and suddenly you're reading an article at the same time, and 2 of those words might kind of come towards you, and then you just end up putting them together. So yeah, I think it's always good just to keep reading a whole variety of stuff and watching a whole variety of stuff, because then you never know what might inspire another creative project. Ta-da!